Alright guys, today we're at Caddis Island County Park. We're going to check a few things out and see what's going on here. So we'll be right back. Alright, so we're out here in Caddis on the red trail. As you can see, the trails are marked. And one of the species that we're going to see right away here is called Phragmites. And this is actually an invasive reed. It's really common, and everyone thinks it's supposed to be here and be part of the environment, but it's actually not. It was brought here by Europeans a long time ago, and they used it for things like, think of like it as like a bubble wrap. It was like a modern day bubble wrap. So they would take all this stuff, all these Phragmites here, these reeds, and what they would do is they would break them apart, and they'd use them for bedding or packing their fancy plates or whatever. So if you take a look at it, it's pretty thin, but it's actually hollow inside. And yeah, so once these things got a hold of what was going on around here, they really started to outcompete everything in the environment around here. So although Phragmites are something that we think of as being commonly associated with this area, really not supposed to be here. So continuing along the red trail, coming up, if you can see in the distance there, some trees that look like they're dead. We're going to get a little closer look at them in a second. But what we're seeing around here, of course, is our pine trees here. See, and they have their protective bark that's going to protect them against forest fires and things like that. A lot of things, if you get close here, this sticker bush is actually called green briar. So that's a pretty common thing that's found in this salt marsh area as well. Some more pitch pine here. And then we're going to make our way past these Phragmites over to those dead trees in the distance. Alright, so we're getting closer to these trees here now, and if you can get a better look at them, what we're looking at is dead Atlantic white cedar trees. And Atlantic white cedar was a really important type of lumber that was used in this area. It was really sought after by boat builders and people who made shingles for roofs and stuff like that, because it's very rot resistant. Let's make our way through this Phragmites here, and it's really overgrown, and we're going to get ourselves a closer look at that Atlantic white cedar. Alright, so standing here on a little wooden footbridge, and what we see all around me is dead Atlantic white cedar trees, and as I mentioned, this is a really important species for lumber. So so much in fact that during in the United States history, when the colonies were in existence, this wood was coveted by the British so much that they made it illegal for people to harvest in the United States and not send it back to England. So I guess King George wanted his cedar for building boats and all sorts of other things like that, because it doesn't rot, like I mentioned. Okay, so big tree, really straight, really good for making stuff with it. Additionally, in the Pine Barrens and in this area locally, these trees would fall into the water and they would sit in a bog or a swamp, and they would be harvested just sitting there. They may have been sitting there for, you know, really long time. So in this area, there was a really important event that happened after World War I, and that was the building of the Point Pleasant Canal, which connected the Manasquan Inlet to this part of the bay, to the Barnegat Bay. And what that did is it allowed salt water to come in, and as the salt water came into this area, it changed the salinity around here, of course, made it saltier, because it was pretty fresh back then before that happened, and basically killed all these trees, and they're still sitting here now since after that time, even though they're dead. So it's kind of like a tree graveyard in this area of Caddis Island Park. but it's all, again, the species is Atlantic white cedar, and a really important species for people in this area historically, especially. All right, so we're coming out of the Red Trail. You can see in the distance the environmental center, which we'll talk about later. We're going to turn left here and go up the main trail, take a look at a couple things. All right, so walking out onto the main trail here, we can see more Phragmites here lining the sides. Again, this invasive reed, really not supposed to be there, but people really do associate it with all sorts of marsh activities. So in the distance, if you can see that boat over there, that's part of an area called Mosquito Cove, and brings us to another important part of it here. Oh look, we got some fish swimming away. Looks like some mummy chogs. If you look down this canal here, it looks oddly straight. This is not a natural canal. This is a man-made canal, and this was dug specifically to control the mosquito population. So they refer to these as mosquito channels. So basically they were dug out by hand, and you'll see that the mosquitoes will land on these channels and they lay their eggs there, and then fish, like the fish you see swimming in the channel here. Oh, and there's a couple of blue crabs over there in the distance. I don't know if you can pick them out. But the fish will swim up the mosquito channel, and they actually eat the larvae of the mosquitoes when they're laid in the still water, thus controlling the mosquito population. So we call that biological control. Towards the other side here of this mosquito channel, we can see a couple things. A lot of wading birds, are found in this area. So it looks like a snowy egret over there, if you could pick him out. And he will eat crustaceans and other things that are found in the mud. So the mud, get a good look at it over here. This mud is known as detritus. So this is basically organic matter that's broken down. Most of it is coming from the cordgrass fields you see out here. So this particular field of cordgrass is made of mostly a genus called Spartina. And Spartina patens and Spartina alterniflora are the two cordgrasses that will be featured here in this marsh and most of coastal marshes on the East Coast. And if you look along the side of the mosquito channel, it's pretty interesting to note that when they did this biological control, obviously they dug it out and they threw the mud on either side. So if you notice that to the sides, the Spartina doesn't dominate. We have these bushes and other plants that are not as good as dealing with salt water, but it's just that small change in elevation along the sides of the mosquito channel that allows these plants to grow and outcompete the Spartina grasses. So it's a pretty interesting ecosystem. Besides just the biological control, we also have diversity based upon how much mud was deposited there by people basically digging these channels out. All right, so in the distance here, we see an osprey nest. This is a man-made osprey nest. The osprey, there's two of them actually, if you can see to the right as well. And far, far in the distance is the Lavalette water tower, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So these man-made osprey nests were designed to bring breeding pairs that are coming to New Jersey. They usually travel up from the Carolinas and Florida, and they'll come here to nurse their young. So it's getting a little bit late in the season now, being the end of September, but this is usually a common place that you can see nesting pairs come together, and the young will live in these nests. So the adults will fly over to the barrier island, where if you can see that Lavalette water tower in the distance, they'll fly over to the barrier island, and that's where they go fishing, and they'll bring the fish back to the nest for the young, which also gives the osprey of the nickname fishhawk. All right, so we're looking at a plaque here that's describing actually the species I mentioned, Spartina patens. If you take a closer look at it here, we can see that all this, it's all coming from one area in the ground, and basically what happens in the ground is it has lateral runners that are going to spread this stuff all around. Now, this stuff is really good at dealing with salt water, like I said. We actually refer to Spartina as a halophyte. A halophyte is something that is a salt-loving organism, so this stuff can actually excrete the salt right from the water and excretes it out the leaves, and that's how it deals with its salt problem. Speaking of problems, here's another one that we've been experiencing in the bay recently. Get a look at that. That is a sea nettle, and they hurt. So that particular species has been a problem now in the Barnegat Bay for a long time because it is here because of our problems. We have added so much fertilizers to our lawns and things like that, where we're adding nitrogen basically, and we're changing the life cycle of our bay. So if you spend time on your SUP or kayak or swimming off of a boat or whatever, you're going to notice that stuff in even these channels here in Caddis Island, and of course in the open bay. And it's because we're over fertilizing. We're adding microscopic algae to the water that wasn't there before. So now the sea nettles during their life cycle are able to exploit that extra food source, and they really blow up their populations. That, and we've changed some things with bulkheads. We've stopped using pressure treated wood, which is good to not have arsenic in our bulkheads, but now we're ending up with more places for the sea nettles to grow during their budding polyp stage, because they're not being killed by the arsenic. So another species you will see here in Caddis Island is the northern bayberry. So if you take a look close on them, it's another species that was used specifically by people in the Pine Barrens. And if you look at the little berries that are in here, and what I'm going to try to do is just kind of smash them up in my hand, and then if you smell them, it smells like I think it smells nice. It's a wax. So this stuff is used to make candles and things like that. So another case of people in the Pine Barrens really adapting to their environment and trying to do what they can with what they had. All right, so here we are inside the Nature Center, where we're showcasing snakes, and there's a nice eastern king snake that seems to be active. Some turtles. It's a pretty common one that you might see around. It's called an eastern painted turtle. And here's another turtle species that's really people have been doing a lot of work with locally to try to preserve. This is called a diamondback terrapin. You can see kind of why it gets its name. Pretty cool turtle. And their nesting sites are protected in New Jersey, so that's a great thing. And we're trying to do things to make sure that they're still here for us. See the display of the osprey here.